Hey, what's up, guys? And let's go back to another news which was reported in Live Mint on 19th November 2020. This was regarding a brand which you all know, Hindustan Unilever, and how they are going to raise their nutrition metrics across all the different brands in India. And as we all know, that Hindustan Unilever has been quite centric over their nutrition and sustainability factors, and in line with those, they have started a whole concept known as Future Foods. This is also taken inspired from the parent Unilever Foundation, which is also following the same footsteps. And the whole concept is to increase the consumption of introduction of healthier diets and limit the impact of environment on the food chain. So regarding that, what they are going to do is they are going to add more nutritious food products in their product line, and they will do that by adding micronutrients such as zinc, iron, and iodine, along with vegetables, fruits, and protein into the nutrition. For sustainability, they are going for the sale of plant-based meat, at the same time dairy-free or dairy alternative dairy products. On behalf of this scheme, they are going. The global firm Unilever firm is going and aiming a sale of 1 billion euro annually in regard to the plant-based meat and dairy alternative sector. And in India, as India's demographics is quite different compared to the foreign lands, and in particularly in India, there is a need to invest more in higher protein food, at the same time also into the and also reducing the farm waste. Moving on, what they are going to launch is they are planning two things in particular, that is 85% of their products will be having less than 5 grams of salt per packing by 2022, and at the same time 95% of their sugar, they have aimed to make the sugar content of one serving less than 22 grams of every product, and the whole calorie count should be less than 250 kilocalorie by 2025. And this will be basically centered on their ice cream plant, especially on the ice cream brands, because they are the most sugar consuming brand. Talking about what kind of changes they are having in terms of their brand, as is they are having a lot of newer brands coming into the space which is providing nutrition. And one of the key example is Horlicks, which they acquired from GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare. And the whole concept of acquiring it was to provide nutrition to the people of India and to increase their nutritional portfolio. Apart from that, they have another tie-up with Hellmann's for their mayonnaise, and they are also focusing on low-fat mayonnaise for providing the extra nutrition. And they have increased their investment in advertising of these products to 25%, and they have seen a lift in the consumption of this particular food product. Apart from them, the other brands such as Boost and the ice cream from Quality Walls, Norsup, these are being targeted in order to make certain changes to make the food more nutritious. Gland Pharma is a pharmaceutical company which was established in Hyderabad in 1978 by PV and Raju, and this news from Business Line. So they were having an IPO, they were going for an IPO, and the IPO has been worth rupees 6,480 crore, which is biggest in India pharmaceutical sector ever. So it's the first company, Indian company with Chinese promoter to go public. At the same time, it has the biggest IPO in the Indian pharmaceutical sector. That's why this is a landmark moment for the whole pharmaceutical industry of India. Talking about what is Gland Pharma, as we know, it has been founded in 1978 by PV and Raju, but it came in 2017. Fosun Pharma, a company, Shanghai-based company which comes under China, that company bought 74% stake of Gland Pharma for $1.1 billion. So, and this deal is said to be the largest acquisition of an Indian company by a Chinese firm. So this deal was very monumental for the whole company and Indian sector in together. Talking about the IPO is of 6,480 crore rupees. The issue price ranges from 1490 to 1500 rupees. From between 9 November and 11th November it was started, and it has been subscribed for 2.06 times as of now. If you talk about the current share price, which is much higher than the initial share price of rupees 1500, it's now rupees 1820.45 on the Bombay Stock Exchange. This means that the share price of Gland Pharma has increased a total of 21.36%, and this is a very large increase in the IPO. Talking about what the company does, the company specializes in integrated injectables and ophthalmic manufacturing, and mainly works in the B2B platform, and 97% of the revenue comes from B2B, business to business partnership. It's operating in almost 60 countries with 7 manufacturing facilities in India, and the headquarters being in Hyderabad. And it has 22 production lines and has been working on several forefronts in terms of pharmaceutical department.
Large-scale migration and good monsoon have helped Nestle India clock strong sales in rural market and small towns. As you can see, Nestle is seeing a good growth over the past few years. Roughly 20 to 25% of sales for the fast-moving consumer goods comes from India's villages. If we talk about 2020, the pandemic year, in Q1, Nestle has seen urban growth surpass rural quite significantly. But from Q2, situation changed. The urban growth was recorded at 0.7% and rural growth at 1.7%. And in Q3, the urban growth for Nestle was only 6%, whereas the rural growth was surpassed upward of 12%. Nestle India strengthened its distribution network earlier, which was 5,000 to 6,000, are now doubled and have added wholesale hubs. It has also doubled its rural outreach from 45,000 to 90,000. It could be said for Nestle that it is reaping the benefits of its cluster-based approach, which was adopted in 2018 by dividing India into 15 different clusters, each considering a different market based on food preference of the local consumers. Nestle is not alone in reporting an increase in the rural and town demand. Let's see some statistics of rural India. The FMCG sector in rural and semi-urban India is estimated to cross $100 billion by 2025. The rural FMCG market is anticipated to expand at a CAGR of 17.41% to $200 billion during 2009 to 2025. But according to IBF and Statista report, the estimation is of about $220 billion. Rural markets account for 40% of the overall FMCG market in India in revenue terms, and leading retailers like Dabur generates over 40 to 45% of its domestic revenue from rural sales. Actual rural revenue accounts for 45% of its overall sale, while other companies earn 30 to 35% of their revenues from rural areas. Moving on towards the next news.
Serum Institute of India, that is the Pune based vaccine manufacturing company, which is world's largest vaccine maker by volume, and its chairman is Cyrus Poonawalla and its chief executive officer is Adar Poonawalla. So this Serum Institute of India is developing a vaccine for coronavirus named Covishield, which is developed with the help of Oxford University and a British firm AstraZeneca. So Serum Institute of India is planning to get a emergency authorization node from the Drug Controller General of India and may get green signal in January 2021. So they are planning to develop 300 to 400 million doses by March or April 2021. And currently its capacity is to produce 50 to 60 million doses per month, but they were planning to increase it by 100 million doses per month. So and the pricing will be 500 to 600 rupees per dose in the private market, but government can buy it at the price of 200 to 220 rupees per dose, because government is going to buy in a bulk, like millions of doses will be bought by the government. So price is kept decreased. And Serum Institute of India does not plan to sign any pacts with other countries currently, because it may not be able to provide vaccines, because especially since India's billions plus population will be the company's primary concern, so they have not any contract with the other countries. In recent news, we have seen the headlines like RBI brings in DBS India unit to save the Lakshmi Vilas Bank, or something like RBI put Lakshmi Vilas Bank under moratorium. So what happened exactly? Today we will discuss that part. So first we will talk about the bank. So Lakshmi Vilas Bank, it's a private sector bank which is publicly listed, and it was founded in 1926, and its headquarter is at Chennai, Tamil Nadu. So why this bank came under moratorium? So there are certain reasons. One was there because of their weak financial position, and to secure this depositors' money, RBI have to do that. Along with that, bank was incurring continuous losses over the last 3 years, and its net worth was getting eroded. Its NPA was mounting. Gross NPA of Lakshmi Vilas Bank in September 2020 was 25.40%, which is very high, and its deposit base was shrinking, and CAR ratio of this Lakshmi Vilas Bank was minus 2.85%. As per the Basel III norms guideline, it should be 10.875%, but in this case it was minus 2.85%. So these are the reasons due to that RBI kept this bank under the moratorium for the 30 days, and during this moratorium period, withdrawal is kept at rupees 25,000 till 16th December, and RBI has suspended the existing board of this bank and appointed Mr. T.N. Manoharan, a former non-executive chairman of Canara Bank, as the administrator of the Lakshmi Vilas Bank. And to revival plan of this bank to merge it with the India Bulls Housing Finance Limited was proposed by the management of the Lakshmi Vilas Bank, but it was shot down by RBI, and proposal to merge with Clicks Capital Limited was also collapsed. And then the revival of Lakshmi Vilas Bank, it will be merged with DBS Bank India Limited. It's an Indian subsidiary part of DBS Bank, that is Development Bank of Singapore. So DBS Bank India Limited can be also termed as DBIL short form. So what happened during this merger? So DBIL, as I said, it's a foreign bank. It's having regulatory capital of rupees 7,109 crore and 2.7% of gross NPA with CRAR ratio at 15.90%. So during this merger, DBIL will infuse rupees 2,500 crore in the Lakshmi Vilas Bank as a working capital to revive this bank. So what happened will after this merger, and what exactly happened with Lakshmi Vilas Bank stakeholders? So typically during the bank mergers, shareholders are issued fresh shares of the merged entity based on a predetermined formula. But in this situation, capital position of the bank has eroded and net worth of this bank is negative. At present, retail shareholders have 24% stake in Lakshmi Vilas Bank. So unlike the issue of Yes Bank and all that, after this merger, Lakshmi Vilas Bank will cease to exist. So its equity shares and debentures would subsequently be delisted. Basically, their value would be written off. So it's a loss of their shareholders. And what happened with employees and depositors? So its employees and depositors will become the employees and depositors of DBIL with the same benefits. So there is not an issue with employees and depositors, but yes, shareholders will get a loss. So that's it about this Lakshmi Vilas Bank issue. Thank you.
NinjaCart, largest B2B fresh produce supply chain in association with Kilo Farms, the agri-tech platform, has come up with residue-free tomatoes. The first batch for the residue-free tomato was cleared by Shyam Industries Institute for Industrial Research, Bangalore. This residue-free tomato is produced through an automated drip irrigation technology through app control that minimizes the use of water. The average production cost increased by just rupees 1 for these residue-free crop, and the company is going to produce 8 more crops that include muskmelon, watermelon, chilies, potato by February 2021. Also, in June 2020, the company launched Footprint, that is a food traceability infrastructure that provides end-to-end food traceability from farm to home. The company was founded in 2015 May by these 6 founders, Mr. Sharath Lognathan, Mr. Thirukumaran Nagarjan, Mr. Vasudevan Chinnathambi, Mr. Karthareswaran KK, Mr. Ashutosh Vikram, and Mr. Sachin Josh. The company follows distinct steps during its supply chain, starting from farmers to collection centers to fulfillment center to distribution center and then to retailers, and provide fresh food supply from farmers to retailers within 12 hours. The major investors for this startup was Tiger Global, Excel, Qualcomm Ventures, Syngenta, Flipkart, and Walmart. SEBI, Security Exchange Board of India, the apex regulatory body of stock exchange, has asked Mr. Subrata Roy, the CEO of Sahara Parivar India Group, to pay back the outstanding liabilities of $8.4 billion, or otherwise his parole will be cancelled and he has to return to the jail. Now let's see what was all this about. It was about the Sahara chit fund scam that happened between 2009 and 11. So Sahara used to run a business of chit fund where he used to increase the money of the wage workers by providing them with some interest on the money they submitted to him. To increase his chit fund business, he also expanded the business and asked from various investors to invest money in his two businesses, Sahara Housing Investment Corporation Limited and Sahara India Real Estate Corporation Limited. Now, to understand what was the scam all about, we have to understand two major terms, that was DRHP and OFCD. DRHP is Draft Red Herring Prospectus, which is the biodata of a company concerning information about name, promoters, managers, and objective past performance balance sheet of a company that it has to submit it to SEBI during its IPO. This information is displayed in the SEBI website for investors to understand about the company. While OFCD is optionally fully converted debentures, this is that the investors have an option to convert their OFCDs, that is their debentures, into equity and become shareholders of the company. So what happened in this Sahara chit fund scam was, there was an IPO of Sahara Prime City, and in this IPO of Sahara Prime City's DRHP, when was submitted to SEBI, SEBI understood that the two companies, that was Sahara's Housing Investment Corporation Limited and Sahara India Real Estate Corporation Limited, were raising funds illegally for these companies. SEBI also got complaints of issuing illegal OFCDs by these companies. SEBI investigated and found out about the illegal activity. And what they found was that inappropriate OFCDs worth 24,000 crores from 2 to 2.5 crore investors were raised, and these were issued from over 2 years without informing SEBI, because there was a rule from SEBI regarding OFCDs that if they issue OFCDs to more than 50 people, then they have to inform SEBI and take permission for further purpose. This resulted in the loss of the money from these investors, and SEBI asked Sahara Group to return the money of investors with 50% interest. And when the SEBI investigated further about these investors, they got to know in 2012 that the information about the investors were not real, and they understood that this was also a money laundering case.
So this is a news related to green shoot of Indian economy. So after 7 months of severe stress triggered by a severe lockdown, there is some good news on the Indian economy. So let us consider the first one, that is the agricultural boosting. A bountiful monsoon has brought a cheer to farmers, with recorded output expected in the Kharif crop season, which is comparatively with the last years. The output of the Kharif season is very much higher due to good amount of rainfall available. Then, with this reservoir filled to the brim, and output is expected to be bountiful in the Rabi season as well. As we can see, there is a 10% of increases in the land coverage of Rabi crops, which is presently in India. Then, as the amount of agricultural production is increases, the rural purchasing power of the farmers is also get increases. So the product demand in the rural area will be increased as a result of it. Then the second thing is the performance of both manufacturing and service sector in October. The manufacturing purchase managers index, which is basically known as purchase manufacturing index PMI, at 58.9 in October, marks the fastest output increase in 13 years. The service PMI has also moved in the positive zone after 8 consecutive months of contraction, touching 54.1 in October compared to 49.8 in previous month. But in the overall sector, when we consider, there is a shrunk is found, which is a 0.8 percentage in October on an year-on-year basis. The next thing is, when we consider the passengers vehicle sales, there is a sharp increases during the month, with Maruti Suzuki recording, which has increased 19 percentage in terms of its sales growth. The another one is the strong rebound in export in September has created a current account surplus. Due to the lockdown, the export and the due to the logistics problem, the export was comparatively less, but there is a rebound has happened. The another one is the increased consumptions of petroleum products since September, and a higher electricity generations indicates that the economy is recovering very fast. Next thing, the foreign direct investment from April to August this year was recorded to be 35 billion US dollars, indicating that the confidence of global investors in India. The continuous improvement in Reserve Bank of India's indices on consumptions and business sentiment for next year too indicates that the confidence levels are on the rise. The another thing is that the most importantly, the goods and service tax collections, which represents the consumption of taxed goods and services, reached rupees 1.05 trillion in October. This is an increase of a 10% on year basis, and this was the highest in the last 8 months. The last time when the GST collection had crossed 1 trillion was in February of month.
India, the second largest producer of sugar, has increased its sugar production threefold to 14.10 lakh tons in the 2020 to 21 season, so far as compared to 4.84 lakh tons in the same period of last year. The reasons being better crop output and timely commencement of crushing operations. According to the Indian Sugar Mills Association, good rainfall and higher water availability in the major producing states of Maharashtra and Karnataka, along with higher acreage and improved yield per hectare, has resulted in the commencement of crushing operations in October this year as compared to last week of November in the last year due to drought and lower output. This year, 271 mills have been operational as compared to 127 mills last year. The production of sugar in the largest sugar producing state, Uttar Pradesh, stands at 3.85 lakh tons till November 15, followed by the second largest producer, Maharashtra, with the production of 5.65 lakh tons, and Karnataka with a production of 3.40 lakh tons till November 15.
The expected demand for sugar stands at 260 lakh tons against the total expected production of 320 lakh tons, which means that this year will also be an year of surplus production of around 60 lakh tons. Thus, the industry is awaiting policy decisions from the government on exports and buffer stock creation with subsidy support. The government provides financial assistance to sugar mills for export as this surplus production, which remains unsold, blocks the funds of the mills by around rupees 19,000 crores, and the payments to farmers also remain due. Even though the government will be able to export the surplus production, but it can provide assistance to the mills only till 2023 as per World Trade Organization arrangement. Thus, the government is looking for long-term solutions. One such solution is the diversion of the excess production to ethanol production and then supplying it to the oil marketing companies for blending with petrol. In this regard, the Food Ministry on 20th November has announced rupees 12,500 crore worth of loans to 185 sugar mills and distilleries for capacity addition of 468 crore liters of ethanol per annum, so that the government can meet its 10% target of blending ethanol with petrol by 2022 and 20% by 2030. The current ethanol blending with petrol stands at 5%. The projects that are funded will be completed in the next 3 to 4 years. This will further help the government in achieving Atmanirbharta in the petroleum sector by reducing the import of crude oil and also increasing the farmer income and creating additional employment in the distilleries.